Hello, welcome to another segment on Wit Save America. I'm your host, Maggie, and I am extremely excited for our segment tonight. I am here to discuss a very interesting topic centering around the question of what makes up or what is at the heart of democracy. Is it all men are created equal? Is it being able to have differing opinions? Is it camaraderie? Now, don't worry. I know this is a loaded subject, especially given our current political climate. But rest assured, I come prepared to make a compelling case of what is at the heart of democracy. I don't think anyone is surprised when I say politics is a touchy subject nowadays, duh. Every time you check the news, open a newspaper or magazine, or even talk to friends about current events, you will likely find yourself feeling intimidated while also being inundated with various opinions and even insults about certain political views. Now, this segment isn't looking to hash out which political beliefs on certain issues are right, or even here to talk about how politics is becoming overly divided. Instead, our segment tonight is to discuss what lies at the core of democracy in order to re-inspire ourselves to be proud, democratic citizens. Nowadays, people might argue democracy is about one's right to hold differing opinions from others, and to an extent, I'd argue they're right. However, when does differing stop and divisiveness start? Are they the same thing? These are some of the questions we will attempt to address, and when I say we, I mean our man Walt Whitman, and myself, as we are Wit Save America after all. To us, brotherhood and camaraderie are at the center of democracy, and while differing opinions are vital to the health of democracy, divisiveness is not. It then becomes essential for us to reinvigorate our feelings about democracy through Walt Whitman's words, to reframe our perspective about democracy and begin to become true democratic citizens. Now, before we talk about camaraderie and brotherhood, we should start by defining the distinction between differences and divisiveness. It's important to discuss differences versus divisiveness because differences make camaraderie and brotherhood stronger, but divisiveness does not. Let me explain. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, yes, so official, different means, quote, partly or totally unlike in nature, form, or quality, end quote. While divisive means, quote, creating disunity or dissension, end quote. Though both definitions appear very alike, let's take a closer look. Different focuses on the characteristics that make people unique or unlike others, while divisive focuses on creating disunity. Think about it. Democracy in its nature is founded on differing opinions. It's what allows people to offer various thoughts with this disagree with the status quo, and create change. Whitman himself agreed with this belief as, according to Political Views by Bernard Hirschhorn, quote, he thought that differing principles dividing the nation into opposing parties, Democrats and Whigs, would not cause the Union to erode. He welcomed partisan conflict as being beneficial to the body politic, placing his confidence in the Democratic Party leadership. End quote. Whitman and I agree that though divisiveness does split people apart and creates an unhealthy nation, divisiveness doesn't celebrate differences. Instead, it looks to tear apart groups of people and pit differences against everyone else. Don't believe me? According to a Pew Research Center study, the United States is currently in its most polarized and divisive state yet. A 2017 report shows that there is, quote, a 52-point increase since 1994, end quote. This increase refers to the chasm that exists between two political parties on issues such as race, immigration, and the role of government. Though it isn't unusual for political parties to differ on issues such as these, the 52-point discrepancy indicates the magnitude of how divisive beliefs are getting between the two political ideologies. In recognizing the two definitions and focusing on how differing opinions are healthy for a democracy, but divisive ones are not, we can then move past the focus on divisiveness and instead look to Whitman's writings to re-inspire ourselves and be proud to be in a democracy because, after all, Whitman is the father of American poetry. Okay, Let's start by discussing which works from Whitman we will touch on. Don't worry, even if you're not an English major and extremely well-versed with Whitman, you can still gain so much from Whitman's writings. We will be discussing parts of the following works: Chance Democratic 21, To Him That Was Crucified, Come Up From the Fields, Father, and As I Lay With My Head in Your Lap, Camarado. Let's start with Whitman's 1860 piece, Chance Democratic 21. Don't worry, I won't start chanting up a storm. The line we are going to focus on is from this work is, quote, Libertad and the divine average, freedom to every slave on the face of the earth, end quote. Chance Democratic 21 is about the narrator taking in the world surrounding politics and recognizing the realities that must come about in order to change them. Though Whitman was increasingly conflicted about his views on slavery in particular, he did, in Chance Democratic 21, arguably advocate for freedom to every slave. In this way, no one person is at the complete mercy of another. Compare this belief now to governmental views on immigration. Though immigration isn't slavery, it is a power issue in the same sense that immigrants are expected to take working jobs that put them at the mercy of a system that doesn't believe they are citizens even if their children are born in the United States or look to give them equal rights or any kind of rights. Looking back to Whitman's words from this piece, in, quote, freedom to every slave on the face of the earth, end quote, and, quote, democracy finally rests upon us, end quote. According to Whitman, democracy in its purest form treats all people equally with dignity and respect because that's the right thing to do. Moving along, we look to two lines specifically from the 1881 to 1882 work, To Him That Was Crucified. The first line is, quote, we few equals in different lands in different times, end quote. The second line is, quote, till we saturate time and eras, that the men and women of races, ages to come, may prove brethren and lovers as we are, end quote. In the first line quoted, Whitman's rhetoric stresses the fundamental distinction between difference and divisiveness. He claims that people are equals regardless if they are from different lands or even different times, such as generations. This adds to the cohesiveness of a melting pot nation in that it doesn't matter where an individual comes from because all are equal. Furthermore, in the second line quoted, Whitman's narrator salutes those who come together to appreciate each other and in turn become brethren and lovers. With this line, Whitman advocates for unity and cohesiveness and doesn't at all hint at any reason for disunity or division to exist and perpetuate. Moving away from politics for a second, but still bringing the discussion to a contemporary reference, compare this brotherhood, love, and cohesion to Harry Potter, with purebloods and half-bloods and muggles. All of these types of wizards and witches are still wizards and witches and can perform magic regardless of who their parents are. And even Hermione, a muggle-born, was the best in her year, just saying. Just because you were born somewhere other than the United States doesn't make you any less of a person, even though much political talk argues otherwise. Those who come together to appreciate their equality, like Harry, Ron, and Hermione, end up being the powerful and successful people we remember and talk about to this day. Moving right along to our third work, we will now discuss a line from the 1865 work, Come Up From the Fields, Father. Quote, alas, poor boy, he will never be better, nor maybe needs to be better, that brave and simple soul. While they stand at home at the door, he is dead already, end quote. This line is a little different than the other ones we have previously discussed. For one thing, this line highlights the awful events that come from disunity. While this Whitman piece was written in relation to the Civil War, the same feelings can exist today in regards to the internal war in America. Due to divisiveness, people are dying trying to cross the border, in police brutality, from power imbalances, and many other things. Divisiveness can result in metaphorical or even physical deaths, as those not in power are at the risk of losing everything. This line warns us about the consequences of not recognizing brotherhood and allowing for the spread of disunity. The last Whitman work we will focus on is the 1890 As I Lay With My Head in Your Lap, Camarado, And the line, quote, "Dearest camarado, I confess I have urged you onward with me and still urge you without the least idea what is our destination," end quote. In this line, Whitman is leaving his readers with immense hope. While divisiveness can bring metaphorical or actual death as illustrated in his previous works, when individuals progress forward together in brotherhood and camaraderie, they can come together, create unity, and bring about change. An example of this is when various groups of voters came together and out to the polls during the midterm election and actually brought about some change in government. Powerful things can happen when brotherhood and camaraderie exist at the heart of democracy. So, as you can all hear, we still have our roots deeply ingrained in brotherhood and camaraderie. Remembering this can help us re-inspire our democratic pride. Walt Whitman, our father of American poetry, made sure that we remembered what is at the heart of democracy, regardless of time or circumstance. Again, according to Bernard Hershorn, quote, "Whitman was fundamentally optimistic about the average individual, believing that democratic government, with all of its possibilities, would work itself out in future generations and promote human happiness," end quote. Whether we be at war with others or war with each other, and knowing that differences will exist forever, we are reminded that divisiveness cannot stand. Camaraderie and brotherhood are at the heart of democracy, and this is something we can always look to Walt Whitman's works to be reminded of. Good stuff, is it not? Well, that's all we have for tonight. Remember to love your fellow American, even if the political climate doesn't always remind you to do so. We are all created equal, and there's plenty of love to go around, so show it once in a while. Thank you again for joining us here on Wit Save America, and we will see you next time.